cold wind howled through the empty streets of East Hollow, a forgotten town nestled between sprawling farmlands and dense whispering forests. The town had seen better days, once thriving with factories and bustling families. Now it was a relic of something lost, its streetlights flickering weakly against the encroaching darkness. The only place still open at this hour was a small, run-down gas station at the edge of town, where a lone attendant sat behind the counter, barely paying attention to the old radio humming static. Logan Carter hadn't meant to stop here. His road trip was supposed to take him straight through Pennsylvania without any detours, but something about the last few miles had felt wrong. He kept driving, but the road stretched on longer than it should have, bending in ways that didn't match the map. And then his gas light blinked on. The nearest station was in East Hollow, a place that hadn't been on his GPS until suddenly it was. The moment Logan stepped out of his car, the air around him felt thick, charged, as if the town itself was watching. The gas station's neon sign flickered, buzzing loudly in the silence. There were no other cars, no sound except the wind and the distant croak of a single raven perched on a power line. Inside, the gas station smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. The attendant, an old man with sunken eyes, barely glanced up from his magazine. Logan cleared his throat. "Pump 3, he said, placing a $20 bill on the counter. The old man didn't move. He licked his lips slowly, then looked up with a hollow expression. "You don't belong here," the attendant muttered, voice hoarse. Logan frowned. "Yeah, I figured. Just passing through." The old man glanced out the window toward the empty road. No one passes through East Hollow. A shiver crawled down Logan's spine. He forced a chuckle, trying to shake off the creeping unease. "Well, I'm not planning on staying." The old man's eyes lingered on him for a second too long before he reached for the register. But when Logan glanced at the counter, the $20 bill was gone. Vanished. The old man's hand hovered over an empty space where the money should have been. Logan's stomach twisted. "Hey!" The radio screeched, the lights flickered. Then, knocking. 3 heavy knocks against the station's glass door. Logan turned sharply. There was no one there. Only the empty parking lot. His car waiting beneath the dim glow of the street lamp. The old man stiffened. "You should leave." Logan hesitated. His gut screamed at him to listen, but his pride refused to let him panic over nothing. He moved toward the door, peering out. A figure stood at the far end of the lot, just beyond the reach of the light. It was tall, too tall, its silhouette distorted by the darkness, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching him. Logan felt his breath hitch. He blinked. The figure was closer now. His pulse pounded in his ears. He turned back to the old man. "Who the hell is that?" The attendant's face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "If you leave now, don't stop. Don't look back. Drive until you see the sun." Logan wasn't the type to scare easily, but something about the old man's voice sent ice through his veins. He nodded slowly, backing toward the door. His car key was clutched so tightly in his palm, that the metal dug into his skin. He stepped outside. The wind had died. The air was still, thick, suffocating. Logan forced himself to keep walking, each step heavy with the feeling of being watched. The moment he reached his car, he yanked the door open and slid inside, locking it in one swift motion. His hands shook as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered. "Come on," he hissed, twisting it again. The car roared to life. Relief washed over him, but as his headlights flooded the parking lot, he realized the figure was gone. His breathing was uneven, adrenaline making his fingers tremble. He shifted into drive and sped toward the exit, not daring to glance at the gas station again. The road stretched ahead, endless, suffocatingly dark. Minutes passed. Then, the knocking returned. Not from outside. The back seat. Logan's grip on the wheel tightened. His mouth went dry. He forced himself to breathe, to think. The rearview mirror? Slowly he let his eyes flick toward it. A reflection stared back. Not his. A face that wasn't a face. A hollow, empty void where eyes should have been. A mouth that stretched too wide. The figure was inside the car. Logan slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching against the pavement. The force of the stop flung his head forward, but when he whipped around, the back seat was empty. He gasped for breath, heart hammering against his ribs. The road was silent. The trees stood still. Had he imagined it? Shakily, he pressed down on the gas again. The car rolled forward, this time slower. His muscles ached from the tension. And then, headlights. Far in the distance, another car. Logan let out a shaky laugh, relieved at the sight of someone else. He lifted his hand in a quick wave as he passed. Then his stomach dropped. The other driver waved back, but it wasn't a driver. It was him. Logan's own face stared at him from the other car, grinning in a way he never had. The second he realized what he was looking at, the headlights flickered, and the car vanished. The road ahead was empty. No sign of another vehicle, no tire tracks, nothing. Logan's breath came in short, shallow gasps. He pressed harder on the gas pedal. The road twisted and curved, but no matter how far he drove, the darkness never lifted. Then, in his rearview mirror, the figure was there again, standing in the middle of the road behind him, its head still tilted, its mouth stretched wide. He was never leaving East Hollow, because East Hollow wasn't a place. It was a loop, and he was already part of it. Logan Carter's hands were still trembling as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the leather. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the low hum of the radio that had somehow switched back on despite him never touching it. The highway stretched before him, an endless ribbon of cracked asphalt swallowed by the oppressive dark. No road signs, no exits. Just the night and the gnawing sense that he had been here before. The gas station, the shadowy figure, the thing that had whispered to him from the backseat. It all felt like a fever dream, but the bruises on his arms, the deep scratches along the side of his car, and the memory of his own reflection waving back at him from another vehicle said otherwise. East Hollow hadn't let him go. His headlights flickered. The radio sputtered. And then, steady. Logan reached for the dial, fingers hesitating, as a voice crackled through the speakers. "You still here?" His throat went dry. He twisted the knob violently, but the station wouldn't change. The voice, soft yet mechanical, continued. "You shouldn't have left." Logan's chest tightened. He pressed his foot against the gas pedal, urging the car faster. His heart pounded with a desperate hope that if he just kept driving, if he just outran whatever had sunk its claws into him, he could escape. The voice hummed in static. "They're waiting for you." Then knocking. Boom, boom, boom. This time, it wasn't from the back seat. It was from the trunk. Logan's breath hitched. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. Every rational thought screamed at him to keep going, to never stop, to pretend he hadn't heard it. Boom, boom, boom. The knocks were slow, deliberate. Whatever was inside his trunk wasn't asking to be let out. It was reminding him that it was already there. Then, the whisper. "Come in." His entire body locked up. The whisper hadn't come from the trunk. It had come from the passenger seat. Logan turned his head, inch by inch, cold sweat slicking his skin. The seat was empty. Then why was there an imprint on the fabric? A deep, unmistakable depression. As if someone had been sitting there the whole time. A movement in his peripheral vision. In the rearview mirror. A face that wasn't his. He slammed the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, tires skidding against the pavement. His breath came in ragged gasps as he fumbled with the door handle. He needed to get out. He needed to run. Boom, boom, boom. The trunk rattled violently. Something inside was trying to escape. Logan scrambled out of the car, nearly tripping over himself as he turned toward the trunk. His pulse was deafening. His body screamed at him to run, but he couldn't. Not without knowing what was inside. His fingers shook as he reached for the latch. The air around him felt thick, suffocating. Then silence. The knocking stopped. Logan hesitated. Then, in the reflection of the trunk's glossy surface, he saw it. A figure standing directly behind him. Tall, too tall. Its head tilted at that impossible angle. The mouth stretched wide. Logan spun around, but nothing. Only the highway, stretching into nothingness. Shaking, he turned back to the car. The trunk was opened, empty, but the inside wasn't empty. It wasn't a trunk anymore. It was a doorway, and it was waiting for him to step inside. His breath came out in sharp, shallow gasps. He stepped back, but the whisper returned. "You never left." The car doors slammed shut on his own. The headlights flickered. Then the road ahead of him changed. It wasn't a highway anymore. It was the gas station. The neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering as if on its last breath. He was back. Logan's stomach twisted. He turned sharply, but the road behind him was gone. Only the station remained, and the attendant was waiting for him. The old man stood in the same place as before, behind the counter, unreadable eyes locked onto Logan. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind the glass door, silhouettes pressed against the glass. Too many of them, watching waiting. Logan's breath hitched, his own voice, distant and broken, whispered in his head. This isn't real. This isn't real. But the gas station door creaked open, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything, and Logan finally understood. He had never left East Hollow. He never would. Logan Carter's hands gripped the counter of the gas station, his nails digging into the worn wood. His breath came in short, sharp gasps, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. The fluorescent light above flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows that seemed to twitch when he wasn't looking. He had been here before. The gas station. The old man. The feeling that something was watching him just beyond the glow of the buzzing neon sign. But this time he wasn't standing outside. He was inside, and the door wouldn't open. The old attendant stared at him from behind the counter, his face half hidden in the dim light. His features were wrong, too smooth, too still, like a mask stretched over something else. The way his lips curved slightly, the way his milky eyes didn't blink, it made Logan's stomach twist. "You came back," the old man said, his voice rasping like dry leaves scraping against pavement. "I never left," Logan whispered. The old man's smile twitched wider. "Exactly." Logan turned to the door, his hand slamming against the glass. Outside, the highway was gone. The neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering between static and letters that rearranged themselves. "Welcome to East Hollow." And then, there is no exit. Logan's throat tightened. The door wouldn't budge. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, breath fogging against the surface. But something was wrong. His reflection wasn't moving. His heart seized. Slowly, hesitantly, he lifted his hand. His reflection didn't. It just stood there, watching. And then... He'd smiled. Not a normal smile, not his smile. Something stretched, something cracked. The mouth opened wider, too wide. Then, boom, boom, boom. Logan stumbled back. The knocking was coming from inside the gas station, but there was no one else there. The old man behind the counter didn't react. He just stared, his grin never fading. Boom, boom, boom. The sound grew louder, more insistent. Logan turned toward the storage room door. It rattled violently, the handle twisting like something on the other side was trying to force its way through. He took a step back. The knocking stopped. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, the door creaked open, and the lights went out. Logan's breath hitched. Darkness swallowed everything. The air turned heavy, thick with the scent of dust and something rotten. Then, the whisper. "You never left." Logan's stomach lurched. A shadow loomed in the doorway. Tall, thin. Its fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. Too long, too sharp. Its head tilted at that impossible angle. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Let me in." Logan turned and bolted toward the counter, his hands scrambling for anything that could be used as a weapon. But the old man was gone. Only his clothes remained. empty, crumpled, like he had never existed. Logan's hands trembled as he grabbed a lighter from the counter, flicking it on. The weak flame cast flickering light across the darkened store. Shelves stretched endlessly, rows of snacks and drinks covered in dust, as if no one had been here in years. Oh, and in the reflection of the cooler doors, the figure stood behind him, watching, smiling. Logan spun around. Nothing. Then, boom, boom, boom. The knocking returned. This time, from the ceiling. Logan's pulse slammed against his ribs. Slowly, he tilted his head upward. Hands, dozens of them, crawling, skittering, pale fingers pressing against the tiles like insects swarming toward their prey. And then the ceiling cracked. A flood of darkness poured through, dripping like liquid shadow. It seeped down the walls, stretching, twisting, forming into shapes that weren't quite human. They had faces. Logan stumbled backward, his foot catching on the floor mat. He hit the ground hard, the lighter slipping from his grasp, rolling away. The shadows grew taller, closer. Mouths opened, whispering his name. Then, the cold hands wrapped around his ankles. Logan screamed. They dragged him. He clawed at the floor, his fingers scraping against the tile. The door was right there, so close. But the gas station was stretching, elongating, the exit pulling further and further away. Then, darkness. A weight pressed against his chest. His breath came in ragged gasps as he opened his eyes. He was outside, lying in the middle of the road. His car was gone. The gas station was gone. Only the neon sign remained, buzzing weakly in the distance. Welcome to Eat Hollow. And beneath it, Nation, you need a single knock echoed from behind him. Slow, deliberate. Boom. Logan didn't turn around. He didn't have to. He already knew they were waiting.